Hello and welcome to Ohio EPA's third virtual information session regarding future Ohio water and wastewater infrastructure funding. If it is your first time joining us, welcome. We will have a brief overview of what we have covered in our first two infrastructure webinars in February and April. And if you are returning to us, thank you for coming back and joining us again. We are pleased to have some new announcements for you today. My name is Jessica Langdon, and I am a legislative liaison and community outreach coordinator with Ohio EPA. I will be moderating today's meeting. With me online, we have our three wonderful panelists. With Ohio EPA is Jerry Rao, our Ohio EPA's Deputy Director of Infrastructure Funding, John Bernstein, Ohio EPA's Chief of Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, also known as DEFA, Katie Courtwright, Assistant Chief of DEFA. Also online is Heidi Griesmer, Ohio EPA's Deputy Director of Communications, and Mary McCarran, Ohio EPA's Manager of Public Involvement. In a minute, Jerry, John, and Katie will be presenting. Jerry oversees all water and wastewater infrastructure funding at Ohio EPA and has been with the agency for over 30 years. John and Katie's division is focused on helping communities. John and Katie's division is focused on helping communities and businesses with their environmental needs, including financial assistance. John has been with the agency for 14 years and Katie has been with it for 7. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items to help our online participants navigate the GoTo platform. On this slide here, you will see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something like this that looks like this on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this meeting, you are listening in using your computer audio. If you are having sound issues or if the slides stop advancing, try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. Please submit questions by clicking on the question mark icon and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. At the end of the presentation, questions submitted online will be read aloud for the whole audience to hear, and Jerry, John, and Katie will answer them. You can also click on the document icon to view included handouts. There should be 3 handouts that are included for this webinar. I would also like to note that we are recording this session. Now, I will go ahead and hand it over to Jerry, John, and Katie for their presentation.
Hey, thanks, Jesse. Hi, everybody. This is Jerry Rao with the Ohio EPA, and I want to first welcome you all here today, and welcome you, and we really do hope that you will learn from the webinar that we have. We hope that we can share some good information with you that will help you to determine whether or not you can take advantage of the wonderful opportunities that we have. This is the third webinar that we have had this year that really has talked about the federal infrastructure bill. The first one we had in February. We had a second one in April. And when we had the one in April, we said, you know, okay, we're gonna try to schedule something in the summertime, perhaps in August, to provide everybody with updates of what we've been working on and where we're at, and some of the newer information that we have. So that really is what it's all about today. Today we want to start off by giving some updates, some kind of general updates, a little bit of a refresher, very brief, about the federal infrastructure bill and some general updates. Then, and this will be a little bit different from the previous 2 webinars, we're gonna spend some time and talk about how local governments and public water systems can nominate projects. Specifically, what we're going to talk about today are the WPCLF nomination opportunities that are coming up. They're actually open right now, as well as the nomination opportunity that is available for drinking water systems that are interested in applying for the funding that's available for emerging contaminants and lead service lines. So we've got a lot of information to share with you. I think we've got a pretty good presentation here together. John and Katie are going to do a really good job. So I wanted to just start off by welcoming you all. We had a lot of people at our first 2 webinars. We've got a really good crowd today. You know, I took a look at tried to take a look at some of the registration as of yesterday, and you know, we literally have communities from A to Z, from Ada to Zanesville, I think, were registered. And of course, you know, a lot of local governments, a lot of public water systems. That's really who we want on here, but also a lot of other key players when it comes to water and wastewater infrastructure. And when I say key players, we've got a lot of consultants and consulting firms that are tied in with us today, and we're very happy that you're with us. We've got technical service providers like RCAP and Ohio Rural Water, some very, very important technical service providers. We've got folks from regional planning and county planning organizations. We've got folks from nonprofit groups and advocacy groups, and we welcome all of you in on these discussions and to get more information. And then, of course, we also have some folks that with our Ohio General Assembly, and we love for them to hear about what we're doing here at Ohio EPA. So with that, I'm going to kind of kick us off. And the part that I'm going to focus in on is giving a general and overall update on where Ohio EPA is with the federal infrastructure bill. So these first couple of slides, if you've been here before, are going to be kind of a quick review. But I think it's important to start off with that good basic information. So the federal infrastructure bill goes by a number of different terms. I think technically it's called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. Most people call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the bill, BIL. Whether you call it the IIJA or the bill or just the federal infrastructure bill, it's really all the same thing. It is the main federal infrastructure bill that passed last November. That's when it was signed into law. So November of 21 was when it was signed, and that infrastructure bill, it was massive. It was somewhere in the magnitude of $1.2 trillion for all forms of infrastructure across the country. So when I say that, I mean roads and highways and state routes and broadband and airports and ports and all manner of infrastructure, you know, and of course water and sewer as well. And that's what we want to talk about today. So of that $1.2 trillion that was passed in the overall federal infrastructure bill, there's about $60 billion that is being routed through US EPA for what I would call environmental infrastructure programs. So a big chunk of that 1.2 trillion is coming through US EPA, the federal agency, about $60 billion. Of that, the majority of it, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 44 billion, is going to be coming through the state revolving fund programs for water and wastewater. What you see on the slide here is some of the other funding that kind of adds up to that 60 billion, but it's a lot of money, and about 3/4 of it is going to be coming through the state revolving fund program. So the way that I like to characterize this when we talk about water and wastewater infrastructure funding and the federal infrastructure bill is that it's two programs for three purposes over 5+ years. So the two programs that the funds are going to be administered through are the Clean Water SRF and the Drinking Water SRF in Ohio, known as the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund and the Water Supply Revolving Loan Account. So those are the two programs, three purposes. First and kind of foremost is there's going to be a lot more federal investment into the core state revolving fund programs. That's really good. I mean, that means that we will have more funds available to loan out all across Ohio for important, you know, water and wastewater infrastructure. We will also have more principal forgiveness that we can administer as well. So that's the kind of the big purpose, but there's two other very important purposes. We're going to have funds available to award to communities for projects that are specifically dealing with emerging contaminant projects. And then we were also going to have funding available for projects that are specifically dealing with lead service line replacements. So the three purposes are general, emerging contaminants, and the replacement of lead service lines. So we're really excited about that. One thing that I think is really a good feature of the federal infrastructure bill is the time period. It's going to be spread out over 5 years. probably 5+ years, because in reality, we haven't yet received these funds. We're in the process of applying for them. We'll talk about that in a minute. But each year, these funds are going to be available in more or less equal measure, although it'll probably grow a little bit each year, 2022 through 2026. We will probably still be administering some of these funds past that time period. So really exciting to have this opportunity to administer these funds. Here we go. This is a table that you've seen before. If you've heard one of our presentations, you know, this has kind of got it all. This is what we project Ohio's share of the federal infrastructure bill funds are going to be. There's a lot of detail on here. We won't go into it all, but if you kind of add up all of these different types of grants over the 5 years, in total, it's about $1.4 billion worth of funds that are going to be coming to Ohio for these important infrastructure projects. You know, I think a lot of times people probably get confused, and I can certainly understand that. You know, like, how do I get some of that? Where do I go? It sounds like a lot of programs and a lot of stuff over this long period of time. So this is just a slide that I came up with to maybe try to illustrate how it's going to work. So that top row there are these 5 different pots of money that are going to be available from the federal infrastructure bill. So that top line is kind of like the federal government and the federal funding source, but all of that money is going to be coming down towards that kind of middle line. You see those 2 boxes, the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund and the Water Supply Revolving Loan Account. So all that money, it's going to be coming into the 2 state revolving fund programs. And then from there, we're going to be awarding those funds to local governments for water and wastewater projects. So very simply, if you want to know how to access it, come to the state revolving fund programs. And that's what we're here to talk about today, the WPCLF and the WSRLA. One thing that I added to this slide, and I think it is important, is that how's this funding going to be awarded? Well, it'll really come in three different types, right? So a lot of it is going to be loans that are made at below market interest rates. You can save a lot of money by borrowing funds at loans at below market interest rates. Some people have said that the loans that they get from our program are roughly the equivalent of about a 15 to 20% grant if you were to compare that to the borrowing costs at say market rate. So low interest loans are definitely a good deal. We also will be offering some of these funds from year to year as kind of a combination of a low interest loan and some principal forgiveness. And then thirdly, and this will be in some limited instances, but we may have the ability with some specific pots of money and some particular types of projects to award principal forgiveness only awards. So it'll be a loan that goes out and it'll be only principal forgiveness. It'll basically function like a grant. So some of the basic parameters of the federal infrastructure bill, some of this we've kind of mentioned. The funding is going to be spread out over a 5-year period of time. I think that's good. I think it gives a lot of public water systems and local governments time to get projects ready, time to go through that thought process and the early planning and get their projects ready. So I think that is really good. The allocations, how much of that comes to Ohio and how does that figured out? Well, there's a formula that US EPA has to use for both the clean water and the drinking water state revolving fund. So it's really pretty much already determined how much Ohio EPA is going to get. And I'll tell you, we're going to get it as soon as we possibly can. Also in the federal infrastructure bill, Congress defined how much of the monies we're allowed to administer as principal forgiveness. So it's really not up to the state. We don't have discretion about whether we want to do it all or we don't want to do much as principal forgiveness. Congress decided, they said, for these funds, for the general purpose funds and for the lead service line replacement funds, the states have to award 49% of that as what we call additional subsidy or principal forgiveness. The other 2 pots of money, there's some emerging contaminant money on both the clean water and the drinking water SRF side. Those funds we're going to be awarding, we need to award it as 100% principal forgiveness. So those are defined for us. Real quickly here, the entities that we are to award that principal forgiveness to, Congress once again wanted to be specific, and they said, these communities that the principal forgiveness funds should go to communities that are either defined as disadvantaged community or that meets the state's criteria as an affordability community. So we pretty much have to go down that route. Of course, we have to use these for what would normally be eligible projects. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue because most of our local governments are pretty keyed into that and understand that. But there are some guardrails as to what types of projects we administer this to. And then lastly, it is federal funds going through federally structured programs so all of the normal state revolving fund requirements will apply. Trying to advance the slide. There we go. So just a couple more from me, and then I'm going to pass it on to John. So, what have we been working on since November? Well, we've been really working really hard since the federal infrastructure bill passed in November. The first thing that I like to point out to people is we haven't been sitting still and just trying to decide how to administer this new program. We have existing programs that we've been administering. So I did a little search and just tried to do a little bit of math for you just to illustrate. And since the infrastructure bill passed in November and the end of July, we awarded about 216 loans totaling almost $850 million. Now that's just kind of our core work from our core program. So you can see it's significant. Like the programs through which these funds are going to flow, they're substantial, and that's great for Ohio. But all to the point that we've been busy trying to keep up with the current demand from local governments. We've been trying to peel apart and understand the federal infrastructure bill as best we could. All of the country was waiting for some further guidance and what we call this implementation memo from US EPA. So we've got that. We've been diving into it. We've been listening to every presentation and every webinar that we could from US EPA and also listening to other states and trying to understand what they're doing and thinking. So we've been spending a lot of time making sure that we understand the aspects of the federal infrastructure bill. We've been doing a lot of outreach of our own, more than ever. So webinars like this, but also we've been at more conferences, more meetings, whether it's in person or virtual. We've had so many conversations with individuals, groups, associations. They've all been helpful. They've all been very helpful for us to get that kind of feedback and help to kind of shape some of the future direction. We did take advantage of the opportunity, and we have re-examined our disadvantaged community definition and what we call the affordability criteria. We've talked about that in I think the past webinar, and John I think will have a slide on that as well. So we have done some work on that. We've already produced the first what we call intended use plan for some of these federal infrastructure bill funds. We did that for the drinking water program. That was drafted. It's been out. It isn't finalized yet, but we're hoping that it will be soon. And then most importantly, we've already started to apply for some of this funding. So we have submitted to US EPA our grant applications for the drinking water base program, for the supplemental funding to the drinking water program that's going to come from the federal infrastructure bill, and we've submitted our application to US EPA for the lead service line money, the first year, right? So these are all 2022 grants, but we've got a jump start on that, and we've got more to do. So that kind of brings us to the present, and we're going to start to dive into some of the opportunities for nominating projects. This is very, very important. And I put this slide up to just give everybody a feel for how these two programs work, the WPCLF and our Drinking Water Assistance Fund, or what we commonly call the WSRLA. So these two programs work, the program years are kind of offset a little bit. So for the WPCLF, it's like the calendar year. So it starts in January and it ends in December, just like a calendar year does. And the period of that year where we take nominations, it's in August of every year. So that's kind of why we're taking advantage of this opportunity in this webinar to get together. It's a good chance for us to remind people about how to nominate projects and what types of things are eligible for the upcoming year. So it's really appropriate and timely that we do that. For the drinking water program, that works on the state fiscal year, right? So it's typically works from July all the way around to June. That aligns with the state fiscal year. So for that year, we've already kind of prepared our plan. We've got a draft plan in place. We've had that out. We've got $1.5 billion worth of projects on that. So it's really a massive plan. But when we developed that, we really hadn't had the opportunity to let you all know and to really do a full solicitation of nominations, especially for the emerging contaminant projects and the lead service line replacement project. So we're going to do that now, and John and Katie are going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. But I just wanted to kind of throw a little information out there about the two programs and the program years that they follow. And then I think wrapping up here, I wanted to just make a couple of comments about some other items that are on the horizon. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about these today, but they are important to some of you, and they'll come in. And I just want you to know that we're on it. We're keeping our eyes open and our ears open for more information. But it's two things I just wanted to quickly mention. One is something called the WIN grants. This was another feature that was included in the federal infrastructure bill, but it's not going through the state revolving fund program. It will be administered by us, but it's not coming through the SRF program. What it is, the bottom line, is it's another potential source of funding directed to small or disadvantaged communities for emerging contaminant related projects, drinking water emerging contaminant projects. So it could be another source of funding that would be available. It could be a pretty substantial source. So it's going to, just like the SRF funding, it's going to be over 5 years. And we're estimating that Ohio's chunk of that is going to be roughly about $20 million a year. We haven't seen the allotment tables on it yet. So it could be significant. We still are waiting for some further guidance from US EPA, and we really can't even apply for these funds yet. But as soon as US EPA announced kind of the opening of these of this program, Ohio raised its hand. We submitted our letter of intent, so we have kind of gone on record of saying we are certainly going to apply for those monies when we have a chance. Last thing I'm going to mention, and I just want you all to know, just make you aware that there is a new domestic preference requirement that's in the federal infrastructure bill. And what that means is that it really wants our loan recipients to try to source materials that are domestically made. And so this version of this requirement is called the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABAA. We just refer to it as BABA, and it is a domestic procurement requirement. We are still trying to make sure that we understand it. We're waiting for more guidance from the Federal Office of Management and Budget, as well as US EPA. So I want you all to know that, like, as soon as we can get a firm grasp on like what those requirements are going to be, when they're going to apply, and who they're going to apply to, we're going to get that guidance ready and out to you. So those are just kind of some overall updates. The second and probably very important part of this webinar is to talk about some of these nomination opportunities that are available. And I think I'm going to turn it over to John to start to talk about the WPCLF nomination opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everybody, for showing up again. I know it's a lot to commit an hour or two, but It's a really good opportunity for us at Ohio EPA to talk to you and for you to ask questions and get some answers in real time. So we do want to talk about our nomination process and about kind of some of the fundamentals of our programs, the WPCLF for wastewater and the WSRLA for drinking water, which Katie will get to in a few minutes. Just starting off here with our landing page for DEFA's Office of Financial Assistance. We just highlighted a couple places for you to kind of hone in on if you show up on our site and you're looking for funding opportunities. At the bottom there, I've got 2 boxes highlighted for the WPCLF and WSRLA. That's a good place to go just to find our nomination materials. We think it's a pretty straightforward form for you to fill out. It's non-binding, so this is the time for you to nominate your projects and kind of get on a list and get in consideration for low interest loan funding or principal forgiveness. Kind of the second row from the bottom, the infrastructure funding, that is our landing page for kind of everything bill related. So we have our previous webinars as well as some fact sheets we'll be working on, and we hope to get out soon. And there on the left side, announcements as well as just the direct link to financial assistance. If you take a look at your menu bar, we do have some handouts today. If you haven't seen them, we've got 2 call for nomination letters, as well as the handout for this webinar. So please take a look there. It also has direct links. But the nomination periods are open for these 3 program areas we're talking about. And please, get your projects in. Okay, so first off, I'm going to cover WPCLF and some of the opportunities we have for calendar year 2023. As Jerry mentioned before, we're focusing in here at the left side, and this is the monies available through bill over the next 5 years. And these are rough estimates. If you hone in on the upper left-hand box in 2022, this is kind of the money that's going to be, we actually call it supplemental. So it's supplemental principal forgiveness that's going to be available for our base program. It's $100 million total coming to the WPCLF, but about 49% of that can be made available as principal forgiveness. That's in addition to our annual capitalization grants. So at the end of the day, we'll have about $75 million in principal forgiveness available, and we'll speak to that a little bit further. But for calendar year 2023, we are focusing on the 2022 capitalization grant from US EPA. Okay, so here's our cycle. This might be familiar to a lot of you, but we do run the program on the calendar year basis for the WPCLF, and we're going to start at the 1 o'clock position, August 1 through August 31st. That's our call for nominations period. So if you have projects you want to nominate, this is the time to do it. It's an electronic process. We've got a pretty straightforward form for you to fill out and send in with any supplemental materials you can provide. Things like your user charge system, your status of any engineering design, your status of permits to install. Any supplemental information you have is very helpful to us as we're evaluating your nominations and putting them into our draft program management plan. So, after August 31st, we're working to evaluate, score, and rank those projects and develop our draft intended use plan or program management plan. That's typically out in mid-October, and that's the opportunity for the public to review the plan, kind of see where you are and what's on offer for your community. After that, we have a public hearing, just one public hearing for the WPCLF, usually in mid-November, and probably like the drinking water program, we do expect it to be hybrid, so it will be in person, as well as an opportunity for people to join in virtually. And after we assess all the comments and respond and do any modifications to the program management plan, we do issue that final program management plan in late December, in time for our program year, which runs from January 1 through December 31st. So it's pretty clean this year for WPCLF. We were kind of catching up and really chewing on a lot of the new requirements and information for bill, but we think it's pretty straightforward for those of you kind of used to our typical annual process. Okay, just a little background, a very familiar slide for any of you who tune into our webinars. This shows you a little bit of background on our 2 programs. WPCLF, very large program, very well capitalized, and has a lot of capacity for our borrowers. Usually, we're seeing probably anywhere between $500–700 million a year. Definitely been trending upwards the last couple of years. That's our capacity. So we have to evaluate the health of the fund and what we can make available to our borrowers each year. It's about $700 million a year is our capacity. On the drinking water side, it's a younger program, less capitalization from US EPA, from the federal government. Capacity is a little bit smaller, a lot smaller really. It's about $170 million a year. And we do look at this year in, year out, just to see what we can handle. And for perspective, we'll talk about principal forgiveness in a minute. If you look at $700 million a year, in a normal year, we're making about $35 million a year available as principal forgiveness for the WPCLF. So looking at about 5% of our total loan volume is going in as principal forgiveness. That'll be increased for bill, for our new bill funds, but probably somewhere in the ballpark of about 10% of funds going as principal forgiveness. A little bit different for drinking water. We've got a lot of different funds between lead and emerging contaminants, and then the supplemental funds coming to the base program through bill. A little bit different on the drinking water side. Okay, just some examples of what you can fund through the WPCLF. And if you've got a wastewater project, nominate it. Really for any publicly owned treatment works, so our communities, villages, cities, sewer districts, you're eligible borrowers, and we'd like to see you come to us with your planning, design, and construction projects. Kind of our bread and butter, I would say, is your sanitary sewer projects, storm sewer projects, wastewater treatment plant rehabilitations. Those are our big hitters. CSO projects have been a big focus for us in recent years. We've really focused, incentivized regionalization projects or consolidation of wastewater systems, as well as nutrient reduction projects, which we'll touch upon in a minute. Okay, kind of hard to see here, but just an example of our checklist for our nomination form. It is the same nomination form for both programs, for drinking water, wastewater. You'll fill out what's pertinent for your project, whether it's for lead, for emerging contaminants, or for the WPCLF, which we're talking about now. For WPCLF, the nomination period is open now until August 31st, and they are electronic nominations, as I mentioned, and they go to dfmail@epa.ohio.gov. It's a monitored mailbox, but you'll only get one response back if you're submitting multiple nominations. We do have instructions for both programs. If you have large files, anything over 10 megabits, will need to be sent through our special file share website. Okay, this just illustrates a typical program year. I took this visual from our 2022 program management plan for the WPCLF, which is our current WPCLF PMP. In this current program year, we had $35.7 million in principal forgiveness. And this is where those dollars were targeted. As I mentioned, regionalization has been a big focus for the agency. So we had $15 million in principal forgiveness targeted to disadvantaged communities with regionalization projects. Backup power, pretty modest, but we were doing $50,000 principal forgiveness loans for backup power at wastewater treatment plants. Very popular program, home sewage treatment systems. We've been giving money out to local health districts to assist low-income homeowners repair and replace septic systems. So we do intend to continue that in program year 2023. And lastly, it's just wastewater infrastructure projects. For both regionalization and for your wastewater infrastructure projects, we're really looking for projects that have a big focus on human health. And you'll see here they're ordered by IPS score and prioritized by readiness to proceed. When we talk about IPS, that's our integrated priority system. We're really looking for what impact your project has on human health. And likewise, readiness to proceed, we're looking to see how ready you are. So if you can demonstrate you've done your planning, you've done your your community outreach, you're under design, you've got a permit to install in, those are going to really help you be ready to proceed and ready to receive an award in our program year. So just looking at that $35 million, we'll have $75 million, and we do have a new focus for some larger communities, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Okay, we talked about this in the previous webinar, and certainly for people that tuned in for the drinking water webinar or applied for our WSRLA funding, we did tweak our affordability criteria. What we had in mind here was to really make these programs have parity. So if you're eligible for one program, you're probably going to be eligible for the other one. In the old program, affordability criteria for the WPCLF per capita income is probably the only one that's changed here for the WPCLF, being replaced by poverty rate. But in the past, you had to be a community with a population under 10,000, and you had to meet 3 of the 4 criteria below. So not much of a change, but we'll talk about what has changed for program year 2023. Okay, what's changed? Like I mentioned, per capita income has kind of gone away and been replaced with poverty rate. If you've tuned in to the last couple of webinars and seen our draft criteria, nothing's really changed. We're looking for a median household income under the statewide average, unemployment rate above the statewide average, poverty rate for your community above this benchmark for 200% of the poverty level below. That is based on the statewide average, and then a percent population change less than 50% for your community. That last population increase, that population change really doesn't impact anybody. So it's the top 3 criteria you really need to focus on. So meeting 3 out of those 4 criteria makes you eligible for principal forgiveness consideration. lot of parity between the two programs. You'll see that kind of in these charts. They share all of the same criteria, except for the percent population change and sewer and water rate analysis we do for the WSRLA. Okay, so as mentioned before, we are making some principal forgiveness available for both small communities and large communities. Historically, we have targeted principal forgiveness to small disadvantaged communities. We do plan to open the door to larger disadvantaged communities this year. What is small and large? That population, the population benchmark is 10,000. So if you're below 10,000, you're a small community. If you're above 10,000, you're a large community. And that goes for both larger communities and counties. So what you see on our website is actually two lists. We actually go ahead and do the analysis for you. So you can go on our website right now and see if you would be eligible for principal forgiveness. So do you meet 3 out of those 4 criteria? Would you be eligible for principal forgiveness in calendar year 2023? So take a look at that. There's nothing you need to do to raise your hand for principal forgiveness. We make that determination based on these lists if you're eligible, based on your IPS, your integrated priority score, as well as your readiness to proceed. And I can mention for large community, we probably will have a little bit more of a targeted focus. You'll see on these 2 slides, it does say they'll be directed towards agency priorities. There could be money going towards regionalization, nutrient reduction, among other things. Okay. And I wanted to mention this today, pretty small piece of the bill pie is clean water emerging contaminants. We talked a lot the last couple slides about the base program, but we do have money coming to emerging contaminants on the clean water side. And when we talk about emerging contaminants, these are really unregulated contaminants for both programs, both water and wastewater, unregulated contaminants. A lot of times thinking about things like PFAS or the forever chemicals, thinking about microplastics and pharmaceuticals are kind of the 3 big ones. So for the grant coming from 2022 for 2023 is about $5 million on the clean water side. And what are we doing? Well, we'd like to see what you have out there. Do you have projects that are addressing PFAS on the wastewater side? Do you have projects that are addressing microplastics or pharmaceuticals or other emerging contaminants? Please nominate them. We'll be evaluating that grant. We do have the opportunity to transfer that grant from the wastewater program to the drinking water program. We've got a lot of needs on the drinking water side, but we don't want to discount the clean water side too. We'd like to see what projects you have out there, and we'll make that decision later on whether that grant will be transferred for use in the drinking water program or if that would be used in the clean water program. So please nominate. That's on the same August 2 to August 31st timeframe for WPCLF nominations. Okay, lastly, for me, before I turn it over to Katie, we do have discounts. So, lots of interest in principal forgiveness, but, please don't look past the discounts. These can make a really big impact on your projects or, on your, repayments if you've got a rising interest rate environment that we're seeing right now. So the last couple of years, we've been focusing a lot on nutrient reduction discount. Those are projects that address nutrients at a wastewater treatment plant. So perhaps you're installing phosphorus removal or something to address nitrogen. Those are kind of the big hitters for nutrient reduction. And we've been making $50 million of 0% funding available for projects that address nutrients at wastewater treatment plants. Secondarily, our regionalization, we've incentivized that with both 0% funding as well as principal forgiveness. When we talk about regionalization, it's really consolidation of 2 wastewater treatment plants. So perhaps you've got one that's poorly performing, and it just makes sense to send that to a larger, better equipped wastewater treatment plant. It could be new sewers in an unsewered community and sending that to an existing wastewater treatment plant, or perhaps you have two unsewered communities and you're sending that to a new regional wastewater treatment plant. That's what we're talking about for regionalization. And yet again, in calendar year 2023, we'll have $50 million in 0% funding. And lastly is our Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. Really popular programs. It's made a huge impact on projects that don't always have the ability to get funded in the state of Ohio. So these are our water resource projects, things like wetland restoration, wetland preservation, and dam removals. And what we do, we allow projects that are generating interest to sponsor projects that are doing those activities, water restoration. So you can get a 0.1% up to a 0.1% interest rate discount for sponsoring these projects. It doesn't cost you anything. extra to sponsor, and we get a really good impact in improving or restoring some water resources across the state. Okay, with that, I think I'm turning it over to Katie to talk about our drinking water offerings.
Screen on here. There we go. Thanks everyone for joining us today. John kind of walked you through, the open opportunities for our WPCLF nomination period, and that's typical cycle for us in August. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk to you about our special call for nominations for our drinking water program. We sent out an announcement yesterday announcing our special call for nominations for lead service line and emerging contaminants projects. If you did receive that announcement, be sure to sign up to our listservs and subscribe to receive our announcements. We can provide some information about that at the end of the webinar. So I'll walk through both of those opportunities, lead service line and then emerging contaminants on the drinking water side. So back to our slide, our table with all the funding sources. For this portion, we're talking about a very specific grant through IIJA funds, and it's for lead service line replacement. That's what the funds have to go for specifically. We're anticipating an annual grant for these funds over the next 5 years at about $71 million annually. A portion of that can be offered as principal forgiveness, and noted at the bottom is the total, but it's 49% of these grants may be awarded as principal forgiveness. The other portion does have to go out as loans. And we'll talk through that a little bit more in a few minutes. Just some background. We've used this graphic quite a bit, but just to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about when we say lead service lines, where are those and what does that mean? So lead service lines is it's the line that goes from the main into a residence or a structure, providing that water line distribution. So if you kind of look at this graphic, there's a number of things going on, but kind of turn your attention to the numbered items. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one says public side, and then right across from that is a number 3 that says private side. And there's a faint dashed blue line kind of vertically that separates kind of public side versus private side. You'll hear those terms used often when we're talking about lead service line replacement. So the public side of a service line is just that. It's owned by the public utility. It's their responsibility. And then from the curb stop into the structure or residence, that's the private side, and that's the homeowner or the property owner's responsibility. For this lead service line funding, what we're looking is for replacement of both sides. It's actually required, US EPA is really pressing states to make sure that both public side and private side is replaced, that we don't leave lead at any opportunity that we have to replace it, we don't leave lead in place in the system. So we want to see public side and private side, both sides of that service line replaced with this funding opportunity. So we've taken the $71 million that we have available, this coming in for lead service line replacement, this capitalization grant, and we've broken it down into 3 kind of buckets. And the reason for that is, as you all well know, not every system is ready to go right out the gate with a lead service line replacement project. Identifying and mapping lead service line locations is kind of that first step. And so we've dedicated some funding just for that. So in that first slice of the upside down triangle is $64.8 million out of the $71 million, and that'll be for loan funds and principal forgiveness. So that's exactly for the projects that you'd be nominating right now during this special call for nominations. That's the funds that would be available for that. The other 2 pieces are going to be administered by our Division of Drinking Groundwaters, and it's for local assistance or technical service provider assistance. So local assistance is direct financing with a community, and then funding through technical service providers like RCAP or Ohio Rural Water is through an entity that we're providing, we have a contract with, and then they provide those services to a community. And what those two pieces are for are really for that lead service line inventorying and mapping piece. It's the first step to get you ready for that lead service line replacement funding. So we wanted to make sure that we offered funding opportunities for systems, no matter where you're at with your lead service line replacement program, that we've got some assistance there for you. There it goes. So with this special call for lead service line project nominations, you know, you may be saying, well, golly, I just did all my nominations, you know, back in February for the drinking water program. And we did receive nominations, and there was about 40, it's actually about 42 million in nominations received for lead service lines through that call that happened back in February. And those are noted and listed in our current draft drinking water program management plan. And what this special call for nominations is for is to solicit additional projects. We need to support that $71 million grant to show that we have sufficient need for that in Ohio and with projects. So we're looking for additional nominations to support our $71 million capitalization grant and provide additional opportunity for folks to submit nominations that may not have been prepared or ready to do that, you know, back in February. This special call for nominations is open for 30 days, and so that'll run through September 5th. Nominations, as John said, it's all the same form, and I'll walk you through here in a little bit. Right on the form, we've identified a spot for you to put the lead service line portion of your project, how much that will be. And you do need to identify that actual amount. And the reason that's important, sometimes our water projects are not standalone lead service line replacements. So sometimes you have a project and that's all it is. It's lead service line replacement projects, and that's fine. Other times, you know, you're doing other work there. You're doing some water line work, and you're also going to address the lead service lines as part of that. So only that lead service line portion of the project would be eligible for this particular funding source. So you'd get some principal forgiveness potentially, and some 0% funding for the lead piece, and then your qualifying rate for the remainder. So that's one of the reasons we ask you to actually identify that amount for lead service line replacement in the nomination form. There it goes. So just to kind of walk through some of the finer points on lead service line funding. For this particular funding source, principal forgiveness, a portion of the funds must be given out as principal forgiveness that we mentioned earlier, and that has to go towards disadvantaged communities. And project readiness is a key factor. So as you're ready to come in the door for that funding, we'll make sure that funding is available for those that are ready to go. So how that shakes out, we were able to make a little bit of an adjustment, sweeten that pot just a little bit. Instead of just 49% principal forgiveness per project, it'll be about 54% principal forgiveness, and the remainder as a 0% loan. So it'll be a combination for the lead service line funding piece. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at full removal of both the public and the private side. That includes restoration that's necessary as a result of the project. So as Jerry said, you know, earlier, you know, folks may be tuning in to say, well, how do I get access to this? And you hear things like principal forgiveness is just for disadvantaged communities. And that is true. And we've tried to make this available to as many systems in Ohio as possible. And a couple of ways that we've done that for lead service line funding. Firstly, lead service line funding, when you're looking at the disadvantaged community criteria that John showed earlier, the population threshold is not a factor for lead service line funding. It's not a factor for emerging contaminants either, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So population is not an eligibility factor. And then also, so if your community meets the other benchmarks, 3 out of 4, for disadvantaged community, fantastic. And most communities do, most systems do. But for whatever reason, if you're a non-disadvantaged community, you don't meet the benchmarks for community-wide, we are able to look at your project at a project level. So we'll take a look at the census tract that the project is located in and evaluate that against the benchmarks to see if there's an opportunity there to provide some principal forgiveness funding for your lead service line replacement. Across the board, disadvantaged, not disadvantaged, lead service line projects are 0% funding. So if you get some principal forgiveness as part of your lead service line replacement, that'd be up to that 54%. Otherwise, it's and the remainder 0%. But if you don't happen to meet disadvantaged, and we take a look at that project specific, we'll definitely make that evaluation for folks. But all of the projects are eligible for that 0% discount rate. As I mentioned earlier, part of our $71 million is going toward providing direct assistance or assistance through providers for that lead service line inventorying and mapping. So we have some technical assistance through our funding source through the $71 million, as well as H2 Ohio. So look for these and look for announcements coming soon as we stand up programs, as funding resources become available for H2 Ohio mini grants, available resources through our contracted providers with RCAP, Ohio Rural Water, and we'll be looking for some future state contracts as well. So lots of opportunities to get your lead service line project up and going. Okay, so that's the lead service line piece. The second part of the special call for nominations for drinking water is for emerging contaminant funding. And we're running that on the same time frame as the nomination call for lead service lines. So the announcement went out yesterday, and that'll be the same time frame, and it'll be a 30-day return on those nominations to September 5th. So looking back at the chart, we're in a new column there for drinking water. The portion for emerging contaminants, it's actually about $19 million a year. Again, as John said, these are estimates, but I think we'll end up at about $19 million per year in funding for the drinking water program, particularly for emerging contaminants. And 100% of that funding can go out as principal forgiveness. It's 100% principal forgiveness and doesn't have to have a loan component, which is a really exciting opportunity. This is new for drinking water and for Ohio. So it's a brand new opportunity for the $19 million. We're targeting, our focus is PFAS related projects. Funding is available for planning, design, construction, whatever stage you're at. We encourage you to nominate your emerging contaminants projects. To drill down into the 19 million just a little further, you see the graphic over to your right. So part of that 19 million, while it is all principal forgiveness, 25% of that must go to disadvantaged communities or public water systems with a population less than 25,000. And then the remainder, 75%, may go to any SRF eligible public water system, which is exciting for anyone that's having to deal with some of these emerging contaminants and PFAS issues. So again, we're anxious to receive, and we're soliciting those nominations for emerging contaminants on the same time frame as the lead service line projects over the next 30 days. Oh, let me go back here. Bear with me. There it is. On the nomination form, I want to point out just a couple of things. As John said, Our nomination is an electronic form. It's just an Excel document, and it ends up being just about 4 pages. So 4 pages and really 3 pages, depending on which program you're applying for. The last piece of the nomination form is a pre-populated schedule. So when you put in your estimated time for when you'd like to receive funds, your estimated loan award date, on the back that pre-populates a schedule with some milestones to kind of help you gauge, when you'd need to submit certain things to the agency for review and kind of when you would be on schedule for bidding and those kind of things. 2 quick points here. I know it's difficult to see probably on this slide, but in the nomination form, we've created 2 separate opportunities to provide specific information about your lead service line costs and emerging contaminants costs. And so when you check the box there for whichever project you're submitting a nomination form, what we'd really appreciate is if you could fill out the actual costs for lead service line or emerging contaminants so that we can tally those up project to project and as a total for the state. As John said, we do have a file share and drop site to send large files, and all the nomination forms go to DFMEAL. If you take a look at the nomination announcement letters that we provided as handouts in the presentation today, and as also on our website, there's more information on how to submit and where things go. Okay. All right, I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Jerry, and he's going to wrap it up for us today.
I am going to wrap it up. Yeah, thank you, Katie. Good job. I know there's been a lot of information here, folks. So just a couple of reminders that I'd like to share. I've got about 4 slides to close us out to kind of give you a flavor for the process moving forward and how we can help answer your questions, how we can stay in touch with one another. But just a couple of quick points. One is today's slides are a handout, so you can find them. You can download the slides from today. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. Second, also as handouts are the call for nominations that we just put out. So if you're listening and you're thinking, gosh, I didn't see that, like, did I miss something? I think you'll find there's information in the handouts that's really helpful about that. One thing that I think you're going to hear from all of us is like, nominate your projects. It's really a pretty simple process. It's not too time consuming. We really do want you to nominate your project. So there was a lot of information that we've given you here. But what we're looking for right now is any and all of those wastewater related WPCLF projects. Like, this is the time of the year for all of those projects to come in, regardless of what specific type they are. And for drinking water, we've got 2 specific types of nominations we're looking for, right? Those emerging contaminant related projects and those lead service line projects. So real quick, want to finish up these slides. So now is the time. It's a great time. It's not too late. There's plenty of time to nominate these projects. We just wanted to put together a little slide here to kind of show you some of our time frames. So for WPCLF, the nomination opened last week. It's going to go through the end of the month. We're going to explain the process and why, it's going to be January 1st is when the program year starts for the WPCLF. So that's normal. For the drinking water, the WSRLA, the emerging contaminants and the lead service lines, those announcements went out yesterday. So that period is going to be open through September 5th. Should be plenty of time to get your ideas, get your thoughts down on those nominations and get them into us. Be really, really helpful. What we're going to do is take all that, and we've got a lot of work to do to process it and to score projects and to do the evaluations that we need to do and to get our plans ready. And those plans are critical to submitting our applications to US EPA. I want to advance to the next. Went too far. Sorry about that. So want to give you 2 timelines. One is with the WPCLF and like what happens from now until this program management, the year starts, if you will. And so where we are right now is on what you see at the left side of the screen. So this is what we call our kind of our project pipeline, or our program management plan pipeline. So anybody that's interested in nominating a project, you kind of get in. We're going to evaluate all those projects. We have to score them and rank them. You know what? We're going to probably get somewhere between $2 and $3 billion worth of nominated projects. That's a lot. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 600 nominations, just a guess. And we're going to have to score all those, put them into various lists, develop the rest of our program plan. We put that out for a 30-day public comment period. We have a public meeting on it, and then we try to, finalize that document, and then the program year starts at the beginning of January. And when we say the program year starts, we've got staff that are working on all those projects, hundreds and hundreds of them. So that gives you kind of a timeline for the WPCLF. The other timeline that we want to show is how are we going to amend the Drinking Water Assistance Fund, the DWAF program management plan. And we've thought this out as well. So again, you start at the left and kind of work your way to the right. Right now is the time to submit nominations for emerging contaminant projects and lead service line replacement projects. If you miss this opportunity now, it's okay. It's going to come around again next year. But anybody that thinks they've got a project or projects ready now, like, go ahead and nominate, right? So we're going to accept those nominations. Same type of thing. We put them through a scoring process. We've got to develop lists. And then what we're going to have to do is come out with kind of an amended draft to what our drinking water plan. There will probably be a public notice period with that, public hearing, and then the same kind of process where we have to go through a public evaluation. We share it with US EPA as well, and then we work towards finalizing that amended Drinking Water Assistance Fund program management plan. I know that's a lot, but we have to have a plan. It's very important we have these plans, that we demonstrate to US EPA how we're going to use the money, what we're going to do with it, as well as we demonstrate to all of the residents of Ohio what we're going to do with this money. So we think that our process, our timeline for the drinking water emerging contaminant and lead service funding is going to be such that by the beginning of the year, we're going to be ready to roll with that funding. Could possibly be sooner than that. But what we're presenting to you is what we think is probably the most realistic scenario. So we're kind of wrapping up here. We have been really urging folks to keep connected and to stay in touch and to participate and to be engaged. We really do want that. We listen to your ideas. We read your comments, and they're very important to us because they help us to shape how we're going to develop these programs to a great extent. So comments, questions, anything that's general, you can submit them to this dedicated email inbox that we have, infrastructurefunding@epa.ohio.gov. We've gotten questions and comments from a lot of folks already. A lot of times we're able to answer those pretty quickly. We monitor that pretty much daily. So if you'd like to get in touch with us that way, that's great. You also should be comfortable in just reaching out and getting in touch with any of us that are on the webinar here, or our staff. I mean, this is what we do. We're here to try to answer your questions. So please feel free to reach out to us. We do want you to know we've got lots of good materials posted on our website. We do spend a fair amount of time trying to make sure that we've got the good stuff there, the stuff that you're going to need. If you try to find it and you can't, let us know. We'll get you right there. We don't want you to spin your wheels, too long. So we want to make sure that we can get that information to you. We would love for you to follow us in any one of a number of ways. We have newsletters that go out on a very regular basis that talk about all of the DEFA activities, and you'll learn a lot about the funding from that. We are on social media, particularly Twitter and LinkedIn. It's been great. Our social media presence has been growing, and we're having more and more posts, and it's really becoming a very good way to keep updated on what's going on. we'd love for you to follow, all of our program announcements. You can, if you're not already, you can kind of sign up to get all of the Ohio EPA announcements that you want, that will keep you up to date on things. So I think we're at the point of our program where we're going to pause and kind of take a breath, and we would love to answer your questions. Now, in the past, this has been really helpful, and I think a pretty robust session of question and answer. We hope that it is today. Don't be afraid to, let us know of any of the questions that you have. We'll do the best that we can. What you see on the screen right now is our contact information for John and Katie and myself. And I think we're going to kind of take a pause and start to answer questions.
Thanks, Jerry, John, and Katie. Yes, Jerry, as you mentioned, if you haven't already done so, you may go ahead and submit questions. Again, the attendee interface, a snapshot of that is on your screen. You're going to click the question mark icon to submit comments. We've already had several comments come in. We will try to answer as many questions as we can today. Mary and I are going to go ahead and read aloud questions alternating, and then we'll have John, Jerry, and Katie answer those. So give you guys a brief period to catch breath. But the first question, I think this will go to you, Katie. It's, if I have an improvement project at my water filtration plant and some of the improvements will address emerging contaminants, how should I submit the project for principal forgiveness? That is from Robert Monroe.
Sorry, I just noticed I was muted. That wouldn't have helped if not. That's a good question. So your improvement project, I don't know if any of you all had a little bit issue hearing, but it broke up for me just a little bit. So I'll maybe read through it again. It's an improvement project. Some of the improvements will address emerging contaminants. Should I submit, how should they submit the project principal forgiveness? I think is the gist of that. So that's a good question. What we're looking for in terms of project nominations for emerging contaminants, the principal forgiveness portion of that project, the emerging contaminants portion, would be the only eligible portion for the principal forgiveness out of that bucket. But if you have an improvement project that, it's in part and parcel, you're going to be doing a improvement to the plant, or that will include something related to emerging contaminants, that's the piece of it we want you to submit as part of your nomination.
Thanks, Katie. Our next question comes from Beverly Grant, and she is asking, are any of these funds available to pay for sewer and water connections for a manufactured home community?
Yeah, I can take that one. So Beverly, that's a good question. There are funds available to connect areas of community that are not currently serviced by a public utility. So for wastewater example, if the manufactured home community has its own system or their own home, each individual home system, there would be an opportunity to connect with the public utility. So we look for that public utility to submit a nomination extending their service lines to that manufactured home community. We'd be happy to talk you through that with our staff to get you going in the right direction.
Thanks, Katie. Our next question is, because of the WIN grants will be administered outside of the SRF program, will the criteria for disadvantaged communities be different from those that apply to the SRF program? Jerry, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So I believe that the criteria will be the same. What the language that comes along with the WIN grants, and we still need to see some guidance from US EPA on this, but what it says is that these funds are to be directed to applicants that the state determines are either small or disadvantaged. And when it says that in the federal law, I believe that it links to the Safe Drinking Water Act definition of disadvantage. So I'm going to say that we believe that it will be defined in the same way, but we want to see what the guidance is from US EPA before I kind of have make a final determination on that.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question is, does the federal program have a population limitation on the principal forgiveness funds for disadvantaged communities? If not, what will the state of Ohio modify, will the state of Ohio modify the population requirement to ensure funds are available to all disadvantaged communities, regardless of population? That question came from Jim Shaw. And John, would you like to address that one?
Sure. Hi, Jim. And I think you indicated that we answered the question, but I thought it was important enough to have the question asked and kind of reiterate the answer. And the federal law does not have a population limit. That's something we have had in place in the state of Ohio for pretty much since we've been offering principal forgiveness for both the wastewater program and the drinking water program. We have kind of, for the WPCLF affordability criteria, we've opened the door to larger communities. So pretty straightforward. We intend to have a pot for larger communities and a pot for smaller communities. So large communities over 10,000 and smaller communities below 10,000. And we've made some tweaks to the drinking water program as well. Interesting to note, we're not the only state in the country that uses population limits for affordability criteria. I think there's about 10 states total across the country that do that.
Thanks, John. The next question came in from Holly Boyer, and I think this might be for you, John, again. Is there any guidance for what to include in the contract bid documents about how to administer the program, as well as any guidance on what the cutoff for the projects that will use the old contract requirements with AIS versus a new contract that adds the Build America requirements? For example, if it is already through 95% design, do we need to redesign and add the BABA requirements? It's kind of a long one.
Yep, great question. So we actually do have what we call construction contract guidance documents that we give out to all of our applicants for both programs. And that includes everything you would need to kind of satisfy our program, bidding requirements like Davis-Bacon wage rates, equal employment opportunity, minority business enterprise, things like that. And of course, American Iron and Steel. With respect to BABA, we are still waiting for guidance from US EPA. I think we've added some language into our loan agreements that kind of indicates that BABA has been in effect since May 14th. What's important for all of you on the line to know, there are some waivers out there. Jerry mentioned some proposed waivers. One of them is if you're under design by May 14th, then you are likely kind of grandfathered in and would not need to comply with BABA. So we're still waiting just to hear the final word on that, but we'll make sure that that gets out to you all. But pay close attention. May 14th, if you're under design, you likely would not have to comply with BABA, but we'd be happy to talk to anybody about any project and whether or not AIS or BABA would apply.
Thanks, John. I think this next question is best addressed by you as well. It's from Larry Long. How is affordability and disadvantaged community status work for county sewer districts or sub-districts or regional water and sewer districts?
Unfortunately, it looks like Larry left, but that's a really good question, and I feel bad not mentioning it. Well, we do intend to look at sewer districts. So historically, we haven't. We've looked at incorporated areas, but we would like to look at sewer districts on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes the boundaries are a little bit unique. We don't have census data that correlates to a sewer district, but we will look at each and every sewer district and use the best available data, whether that's at the county level or if they're kind of within a community or communities, and give them the opportunity to be eligible for principal forgiveness.
Thanks, John. Again, I think this one is also for you, and it's, are water and sewer districts eligible for large community principal forgiveness? This is asked by Stephanie Cooper.
Yeah, kind of the same question. And yeah, the answer is yes, we will evaluate the sewer district. Even if you serve above 10,000 people, we would look at the best available data, perhaps look at the area served, but we would like to make that evaluation kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, John. If you could, can you provide a website where to find if our community meets the eligibility for principal forgiveness criteria? This is coming from Jennifer Webster. Katie, can you provide that, or was it on a slide?
Yeah, we sure can. It may be on one of the slides, but there's a couple ways to do that. In the handouts, there are our nomination letters, and within those letters are hyperlinks right to the website. For WPCLF, on the website, we have the lists for eligibility, small communities and large communities that John went through previously. For drinking water, I'm presuming this is for wastewater, but for drinking water, you can also visit the website and take a look at our draft drinking water program management plan, and it outlines those communities we've already identified for this current program year, 2023 year, that are eligible for that principal forgiveness funding. So it's in the slides, I do believe, at the summary slide that John went over for the website, where to find those things, and then it's also in the nomination letters as well.
Thanks, Katie. M. Tucker asks, has the Green Project Reserve discount been eliminated? John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, good question, Melissa. Always finding things we forgot to include. It has not been eliminated. Green Project Reserve is a function of our Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. It's a discount we offer for projects that are implementing green practices. So it's I believe a 0.25% discount on your interest rate if at least 25% of that project addresses kind of what we consider green. And if anybody is curious about that, we can point you towards the eligibility document that speaks to green practices, things like, bioswales, things like that, to eliminate stormwater perhaps, or reduce stormwater going into sewer systems.
Thanks, John. Our next comes from Jenna Biddock. Page 21 of the slide shows 2 lists for principal forgiveness eligibility. Is this something that is published on the Ohio EPA website? I can see my county isn't listed. Do you have to apply to make the list? We haven't nominated yet. And I'll go ahead and pull that slide up for reference for folks. Katie, would you like to take that question?
Sure can. Yeah, similarly to, I think, a previous question is a little similar. Both of these lists are available on our website. One, the small communities, that's for any community 10,000 or less in population that meet all the benchmark criteria. And then for large communities and counties, that's for those communities or counties over 10,000 population that also meet the benchmark criteria. If you don't see your county on there, it's likely, you don't meet the criteria on face value, so straight for the county. What I would suggest, nominate your project. What we discussed a little earlier was that we can take a look at on a project by project basis. So if your project happens to be benefiting an area that is disadvantaged, we can take a look at a project evaluation. So go ahead and submit that project, nominate it, and we can do that project evaluation, even if you don't see your county listed on the large system list.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Katie, I know this is probably obvious, but like that slide is just an illustration of the lists. That's not,
Yes.
that is not those are just like the first 2, the front pages of those lists. So yeah, the real lists that you're going to want to see are on our websites.
Yeah, good to know. Snippets. There's snippets of the full lists.
Right.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Jerry and Katie. Katie, I think this is another one for you. It was submitted by Matt Watson. Is all the WPCLF funding a maximum of 30-year loans, or can loans terms be extended to 50 years if the service life of the improvements can be proven to be 50 years?
It's a good question. So we tailor, there are some limits to our funding terms. And some of that is federally mandated, you know, what we're allowed to. So up in the Clean Water Act, and Jerry and John probably know that reference better than I do, but there are some limitations to our terms, loan terms. And I do believe we can go 30 years. And then it's a special situation. We call that extended term bond financing for longer terms. And all of that is based on the useful life of the asset. So as you mentioned there, the service life of the improvements. So our typical terms are 20 years, and then extended terms up to 30, and then special kind of consideration for what we call extended term bond financing. It's just a different security vehicle for the loan agreement. Can go in addition to that based on the useful life.
Thanks. Our next question is also from Matt Watson. His question is the August nomination process for WPCLF for design loans as well? John, can you respond to that question?
Sure. Yeah. So August for the WPCLF, you can submit any WPCLF project you have, whether it's planning, design, or construction. For both programs, we actually allow planning and design loan nominations year round. It'd be greatly helpful to us. You know, if you're ready and you're ready to submit them now. If you've got planning, design nominations, nutrient reduction projects for the WPCLF can also be submitted year round. On the drinking water side, emerging contaminants and lead projects can also be submitted year round, as well as planning design.
Thanks, John. The next question is from Scott Mokling. Sorry, Scott, if I said your name wrong, but if the public water system is ready to replace lead service lines, but don't have the inspection staff to oversee the contractors, can outsourcing of the inspectors be reimbursed through the lead service line funding? Up to what percentage? Katie, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Scott, good question. So inspections are, you know, kind of a necessary part of any project. And typically how we see that, you know, it's part of like construction administration, or a consulting engineering group does that. Some folks do that in-house. And if you don't have folks lined up for that inspection, you're saying outsourcing of inspectors, and maybe that's, you know, a terminology about, you know, maybe doing some contracting for that work. So construction administration is allowable for those type of things. We don't have a set percentage on allowable percentage for oversight and inspection. Just a, you know, kind of a rule of thumb and part and parcel to a typical project. So it is allowable, and we don't have a set percentage.
Thanks, Katie. Our next question is from Benjamin Amick. For the lead service line, do planning documents need to be submitted at the time of the nomination, or can a community submit said documents at a later date? John, would you mind addressing that one?
Sure. Hi, Ben. No, they don't need to be submitted at a time of nomination. Really, we need your nomination form. As much information as you have at time of nomination is fantastic. We can gather and work with you to address any other document needs, you know, prior to loan award. So the important thing is just to get your project in the door, you know, get that Excel sheet, you know, filled out, signed, and submitted prior to the end of the nomination period.
Thanks, John. This is another follow-up question to Scott Mokling, and he's asking, to his first question, can a public water system use BIL money to fund the position dedicated to lead service line removal oversight management?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Jesse. My initial reaction, Scott, is probably not. We do have the ability sometimes to fund, you know, in-house work, or sometimes what we call force account work. My initial reaction is no, but we'd be happy to talk to you offline just to see if there's a fit or if I'm misunderstanding the question.
Thanks, John. I think this next question is for you as well. It comes from Kay Borchers. For the small and large communities eligible for principal forgiveness in the WPCLF, does this designation make the community eligible for principal forgiveness for any project, typical sewer replacement, for instance, or just specific kinds of projects like regionalization?
Hi, Kay. Good question. You'd be eligible for any project you nominate in the WPCLF. It's a little bit different in the drinking water program since we look at the presence of human health factors. But if a community is eligible for principal forgiveness, they would be receiving consideration for principal forgiveness. If they're not doing a regionalization project, and that's a focus area, like if we have a pot for regionalization and they're not doing that type of project, they wouldn't get consideration for that, but they would be considered for whatever project they have nominated.
Thanks, John. Jerry, do you want to take this next question? It's from Robert Keedy, and he's asking, for a new water treatment plant, are emerging contaminant funds only for removal components, and example, RO, skids, or the entire plant that support the removal?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe the best way to think of this is the emerging contaminant funding would need to be specific to the portions of the plant that really are honing in on the emerging contaminants. So I'm not sure exactly how we get there, but probably if it were a new water treatment plant, we would be looking at that, and we would work with the applicant on that, but we would look at the whole and try to somehow determine like which portion of that overall project we could attribute to the emerging contaminant treatment part of it. So I hope that answers the question. It's not that we're trying to be overly strict with this, but US EPA has some pretty specific expectations that this money is going to be used either for directly for treatment or for the improvement of source water, which is another area that you can use the emerging contaminant money for, or regionalization, essentially combining with another system. So it's more than just treatment. It could be enhanced treatment, it could be improvement of the source water, or it could be regionalizing. Those are kind of the three main buckets of eligibility for emerging contaminant money. But back to the original question, if there were a new kind of a large scale water treatment plant project, we would probably look at it to try to determine like which parts of that would be kind of standard conventional treatment versus which part or percentage or pieces of that are more attributable to specifically to treatment for emerging contaminants. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jerry. John, Aaron Wright has asked, do we renominate the lead projects that we submitted in March?
Yeah, good question, Aaron. So as we mentioned, this is a supplemental call for nominations for lead service lines. So if you didn't nominate in March, now is the time to raise your hand. If you did nominate in March and you're on our draft program management plan, we intend to hopefully have that finalized in the coming weeks. You could go, prior to these new projects being finalized. So as Jerry kind of showed, we expect the revised WAF program management plan to be kind of on the street around January 1, but our initial program management plan with these first round of lead projects will be out fairly soon. So no, you don't need to renominate if you already nominated in March.
Thanks, John. The next question I think is also for you. It was submitted by Ben Howard, and he's asking, is there a list of recognized emerging contaminants?
Hi, Ben. There is. For drinking water, it's pretty straightforward and pretty specific from US EPA. What they would point you towards is the contaminant candidate list. This is a list of unregulated contaminants that's been updated over time. They call them the CCL lists. And PFAS is one of the contaminants there. What US EPA has made very clear is even if PFAS becomes regulated and has a limit, it will still be able to be addressed through the bill funding. But beyond PFAS, those CCL lists are kind of where to go, and those are on US EPA's website.
Thanks, John. Katie, Pateka Pope Bannister has asked, does the lead service line replacement application need to be for the private side only? Can the funds cover full replacement?
Good question. So for lead service line funding, what we're looking for is full replacement. So public side and private side. So not just private side, but we want to see public side replacement and private side replacement. Of course, you know, if for whatever reason, maybe the public side was taken care of a while back and you're coming back through and doing the private side, you would only be addressing, you know, that private side as part of the project. But if you have both, nominate it for both. We want to take care of both at the same time.
Thanks, Katie. John, I think the next one's for you. It was submitted by Brenna Kohler, and she's asking, will Ohio EPA be assisting public water systems in determining which census tracts in non-disadvantaged cities qualify for principal forgiveness loans for LSLR?
Yeah, we'd certainly be happy to do that, Brenda. You know, for a disadvantaged community, you know, if you already meet the disadvantaged community criteria, you don't need to go ahead and do that analysis at the census tract level. So, you know, if you meet it, you're kind of no further action needed, and you can replace lead service lines across your service area. But if you're a non-disadvantaged community, you know, we'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Census Bureau has some pretty good tools to look at that data. So we'd be looking at similar data, but at the census tract level, and we'd be happy to help any community kind of piece that materials together.
Thanks, John. Katie, Stephanie Kiefer is asking, are water and sewer districts eligible for large community principal forgiveness? If not, if we submit a nomination on behalf of a community that is listed as eligible, then this is permitted, yes?
Right, so what we're trying to do for WPCLF, I think John kind of alluded to this earlier, is that for counties, water districts, we'll be taking a look at that, you know, on a project by project basis. So, you know, our census data that we use as the benchmarks, you know, we don't necessarily have that for a district. It can be made up of multiple counties or specific areas. And so we'll take a look at district information at the project level to make that determination.
We've had a couple questions come in about some of the resources provided. So Sherry Woody, you had asked if this session is being recorded and where will it be posted? Yes, so the current session is being recorded and we actually send that out to all attendees. So you guys will actually be getting an email with the session recorded as well as the handouts that I've provided. And then we also had a question from Peter Trowbridge, who had mentioned an eligibility table for communities on your website. Can we get a link to that? Yes, any links that we've discussed, we can provide those also in the email. So that's not a problem. Just so then you guys have those resources in one spot, one email. So we will provide those. Moving forward, we have a question from Brian Hines. He's asking, do we need to spend the awarded amount within the fiscal year, or do we have the option to apply for a multi-year program? John, do you want to take that question?
It's a good question. So once again, for the WPCLF, our wastewater program runs in the calendar year, and the drinking water program runs on the fiscal year. And we kind of look at it as getting your project awarded within that time frame. So, you know, if you have an award in August, you don't have to have that money spent down, right? Sometimes projects can take a year or longer. So it doesn't need to be spent down. It really needs to be obligated in that program year, especially for principal forgiveness. Multi-year programs, you know, sometimes we see projects phased, but we can't really commit to like grant dollars from 1 year to another. You're competing in each individual program year. But happy to talk if you have something in mind and that doesn't answer the question.
Thank you. Katie, James Mahaffey is asking if lead mapping projects eligible for principal forgiveness under the amended DWAF this August. So are they eligible?
Yeah, so great question, James. So for lead service line projects, we're looking, you know, submit those. We consider mapping as part of like a planning activity. So planning, design, and construction for lead service line. That's the nominations that we're looking for that lead service line funding.
If I could add to that, Katie, you were spot on. I just wanted to let people know that there are some other options for funding for the mapping and inventory work, and we have done some of that utilizing some of the H2 Ohio funds that the state has made available. We recently kind of conducted, the Ohio EPA has a what we call a mini grant program for public water systems to apply for some, as the name would imply, mini grants for lead service line inventory and mapping, and it was very successful. A couple $1 million, I think, in funding was made available, and we're looking very closely at perhaps replicating that. So keep your eyes open for that. That may be another source of funding that could be available for inventory and mapping.
Thanks, Jerry and Katie. The next question is from Roberta Strefford. Sorry, Roberta, and I think you've actually left, but we'll go ahead and ask the question anyway. Her question was, in your lead service line handout from the website, there is a list of required documents. Are those due at the time of the nomination, or when we actually apply?
So if it's the lead service line handout that I'm thinking of, we have a fact sheet from about a year or so ago on our website, and we're in the process of updating that. It's a very technical document that has lots of information about getting, kind of into the weeds on lead service line replacement. And there's a lot of references in there in terms of, kind of the check marks of things you have to have before your project's ready to proceed to that next step. Those are not the list of required documents for the nomination. So in the nomination form on that very front tab is the list of documents that you need for the nomination submittal. And then once your project is coming more to fruition and you're ready for our loan approval, that's when we'll be looking for some of these other very specific documents identified in that fact sheet.
Thanks, Katie. John, Lincoln Fry is asking, for lead service line replacements, if we have no known lead lines, can we submit for a project just for the investigation, or does it need to be tied to a lead service line replacement project?
It's a great question, and maybe Jerry kind of touched upon this already, but if you have a lead project, whether it's planning, design, construction, we encourage you to nominate it. For a project like that, it might not be eligible for principal forgiveness if you're a disadvantaged community, but we're going to have a whole lot of opportunities outside of the SRF even for lead service line identification. We're working with people like RCAP, Rural Community Assistance Program, Ohio Rural Water. Katie mentioned the local assistance. We may be getting some new state contracts for this type of work, and H2 Ohio. We anticipate another round of our mini grants. So lots of opportunities, and it's really helpful for us to see that you have a need in your community. So please do nominate, and happy for further discussion on your projects.
Thanks, John. Jerry, I think this next one you might want to take. It's from Stephen Wellstead, and he is asking, apologize if I missed this when it was discussed earlier, but could you please clarify the principal forgiveness situation for WPCLF program for large communities, counties over 10,000 population that meet the eligibility criteria? Has it been definitively determined that they will have an opportunity to participate in principal forgiveness during the 2023 program year, or is that still to be determined?
That's a great question, and very specific. So thank you, though, Stephen, for it. So I will tell you exactly where we're at. I don't think that it has absolutely been definitively decided. What we have talked about in, I think, our previous webinar, and then once again today, is that on the wastewater side, on the WPCLF side, the total pool of potential principal forgiveness is larger than it is on the drinking water side. And that's important, you know. So what we think is on the WPCLF side, and John mentioned this, you know, we're thinking that what we're going to have available is about $75 million. That's compared to, on a normal year, about $30 million. So that expansion of the potential principal forgiveness funding is what has led us to think that, you know, maybe we will go on this path of making the larger communities eligible, and having kind of the small community pot as John described, in the large community pot. To your question, Stephen, you know, when that will become more formalized is probably when we come out with the draft program management plan in a few months. I mean, that's when we will that's when it will be more formal. I think what we're trying to indicate to you all is that we're looking very seriously at that, right? And so I think there is a good chance that will be part of the ultimate plan. It just, you know, we haven't come out with that draft plan yet, and so that's where it would actually be. That's where it would be articulated as to whether or not it's in there. So, you know, we've been pretty open about talking about it. So I think it's something that the agency is definitely interested in. It hasn't been formalized yet. So we would, if it makes a difference to applicants, you know, at this stage about whether you nominate or not, I think, you know, the theme that you're probably hearing from us all is nominate your projects for, you know, we really do want you to do that. So please, by all means, nominate. The prospects of having that large community pot for disadvantaged communities that are over 10,000 in population, it's probably pretty strong, but it's not a final decision yet. I hope that answers your question. It's as best I can, Stephen.
Thanks, Jerry. John, Stephen Howley is asking, can you confirm that the list of disadvantaged communities prepared by DEFA using the revised affordability criteria for water and wastewater has been posted on DEFA's webpage? Thanks.
Yep. Hi, Steve. Good question. So the list that we pulled up and that are posted right now, you know, they are specific to the WPCLF. All the materials we need to make that determination are available through the Census Bureau. So it does use the revised affordability criteria that we've been going over. If you're looking at drinking water, you know, we use a lot of those same criteria. You would also add, you know, sewer and water rates if needed, and the projects need to address a human health component on the drinking water side. But for WPCLF, those list all the communities that are eligible for clean water principal forgiveness.
Thanks, John. I think you might want to take this one as well. It's from Justin Harsha, and he's asking, can water filters required when replacing the lead service lines be part of the project cost?
They can be. That's kind of new from Bill. You know, in the past, that probably would not have been an eligible expense to include the cost of water filters. We would definitely want to have a discussion with you and probably our division of drinking groundwaters, just, you know, the need, maybe the timing of what that would look like for your project. But it is an eligible expense and can be included as part of your loan funding for a lead project.
Thanks, John. Jerry, Sherry Woody is asking, with respect to the various principal forgiveness loans for PFAS, can the funding be used to do sampling and analysis for a system wanting to find the sources of PFAS in their source water protection area? Finding the sources and dealing with it, they can be the best way to solve the problem rather than installing expensive treatment.
Great question. Thank you. And we get this a lot. So I believe that those expenses could be eligible. With just a little caveat, but I want my response to be really perceived as yes, please nominate it. What we would consider that to be in the funding world would be we would call that kind of a planning type of activity, right? So like if additional work needs to be done to either better identify where the contamination is or where it's coming from the standpoint of trying to figure out strategies to deal with it. I believe that would be an eligible activity. We would, in the funding world, we would call that kind of a planning activity, right? Like you're trying to, get a better sense of the problem and where it is so that you can figure out how to address it.
Thanks, Jerry. This next question is from Robin Brown. And John, I think you kind of just discussed a little bit of this a minute ago, but she's asking, can you give more insight on the disadvantaged communities definition?
It might be helpful, Mary. I don't know if you can flip to that slide. I had the two charts with our disadvantaged community criteria, but just for some background, for principal forgiveness is still relatively new. The SRF programs have always been loan programs until about 2009 when we had the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And that's when principal forgiveness became an option for the state revolving fund programs. More recently, for the Clean Water Program, we had to develop affordability criteria, I think around 2013, 14. And that's not quite the slide I was looking for, Mary. There were two tables that show the criteria. But kind of federal.
One more slide. Go back one more slide, Mary, if you could, please.
Okay. There we are.
Yep. So if you look on the left, we talked a lot about the WPCLF. These criteria are kind of specified by US EPA. They tell us more or less what to look for when the states develop affordability criteria. So we develop them and we get approval from US EPA on what these criteria look like. So on the left for the Clean Water Program, we look at statewide median household income, unemployment rate, which is a statewide average of the 200% poverty level, and we look at percent population change. So if you meet three of those four criteria, you would be a disadvantaged community eligible for principal forgiveness. Similarly, on the Drinking Water Program, we've tweaked both of these, but similar criteria. We have median household income, the poverty rate, unemployment rate. When it's a little bit different, we do an analysis of your sewer and water rates compared to median household income, and you have to have a human health component to your project, things that may affect health if people are drinking water. So that's kind of the nitty gritty. Happy to talk offline if you have more questions. And we do anticipate having some fact sheets out in the near future, just speaking to a lot of these things we're talking about. So maybe the nomination process, disadvantaged community criteria, lead service line funding. So stay tuned for those.
Thanks, John. Katie, Brian Hackman has asked if we could please clarify the difference between a nomination submitted with a general plan due September 5th with a detailed plans that reads as if both are due the same day for project year 23 emerging contaminants funding.
I'll take a swing at it. I think I understand the question there, but I know we have a lot of nomination announcements going on all at one time. So really we have three opportunities. For WPCLF, it's our open call for nominations for anything wastewater related, and that's due the end of August here. And then on the drinking water side, we have lead service line and emerging contaminants call for nominations, and all of that is due September 5th. So for drinking water, it's lead service line funding projects and emerging contaminant projects. They're all due September 5th. Is the deadline we're putting out there. I think in reference to like the general plan and things like that, those are for like our traditional drinking water projects that were more likely nominated, back in February. For general plan, those are typically those projects that have like a water treatment plan improvement or similar type activity. So for these two calls, for the special call for nominations, everything's due September 5th, lead service line and emerging contaminants. And Brian, if that doesn't answer your question, I'm happy to chat with you offline and track that down for you.
Thanks, Katie. That actually brings up a good point. If you guys have further questions after this, again, we can pull up after the webinar or when we get down to the last couple of questions, Jerry, John, and Katie's contact information. And again, you can also email any questions that you have to that infrastructure funding at epa.ohio.gov. So just as kind of a reiteration of that. Our next question is from Stephen Hockey. Sorry, Stephen, if I said your name wrong, but he's asking, understanding that the intent of the funds is for capital projects, will Ohio EPA issue guidance on eligibility of funding for non-capital projects that are a prelude necessity to planning for capital projects? Jerry, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, Jesse. Steve, I think that kind of is similar to maybe my previous response. So in our world, we conceptually think of projects as planning, design, and construction. Construction being capital projects, right? Capital improvement projects. But we recognize that before you get to a capital project, a construction project, there's work that needs to be done. And the step that usually is before that is engineering design. The step that's before that is planning. And so if there's work that a community needs to do in order to better understand and to evaluate a project and the best solutions, then that can all be eligible. Planning, design, construction. All three phases are eligible. That's the same whether it's like the wastewater program, the WPCLF, the drinking water program, all of those, whether it's lead service line funding, emerging contaminant funding. Throughout all of those programs, all of these different streams, planning and design and construction are always going to be eligible. And that planning part, I think it might be the part that you're honing in on, is like the work that an entity needs to do in order to get to the part where they're going to enter into a design contract. So yeah, it's all eligible. If we need to, and I think like with the emerging contaminant money, we may need to issue some guidance, as you're suggesting, to make it a little clearer, when we're talking about sampling or monitoring, like if there's anything that any of those parts that might be ineligible, we will articulate that. So good suggestion. We'll think about doing some follow-up, especially with regard to maybe that emerging contaminant funding to make sure that it's clear.
Thanks, Jerry. John, Steve Dharmafal has asked, well, Jerry mentioned something about an IPS score. Is this something that is only relevant for principal forgiveness projects? For WPCLF nominations, how are IPS scores determined?
Yeah, great question, Steve. So the IPS is the integrated priority system. And so both programs have scoring systems for all the project nominations that come in. And the IPS is our system for the WPCLF or wastewater program. It's mostly relevant for principal forgiveness projects. That's where there's a lot of demand and, just not as much principal forgiveness as there are projects eligible for it. So it's very important for all projects, just because, in times past, we might not have had the capacity to fund all projects that come to the door and are ready to proceed in a given year. We do now, so for kind of your run-of-the-mill projects that might not be competing for principal forgiveness, the IPS is still important, but not nearly as important as it is for principal forgiveness projects. And how it's determined, we've got a system, and actually our program management plan has a link to that system and all the work that goes into it. But we look at we look at the materials from within your nomination. We look at the problems the project's addressing, and a number of other factors in coming up with that score. And you'll actually see a score if you look at our principal forgiveness list for the WPCLF program. You will actually see the IPS score for a given project for our principal forgiveness lists.
Thanks, John. The next question is from Joel Agner. And Joel's asking, will the project only fund municipalities, or will industry be included, as well as making substantial wastewater infrastructure upgrades that free up municipality capacity? Do you want to take that, Jerry?
Yeah, Jesse, could you read that question one more time, just so I can hear it again?
Yeah, no, you're fine. And sorry if my microphone might be quiet. But Joel Agner is asking, will the project only fund municipalities, or will industry be included, as well as making substantial wastewater infrastructure upgrades that free up municipality capacity?
Yeah, what I think I heard in there was a question that had like an industrial component to it, and it kind of like maybe capacity. So I'm going to take a shot at answering this best as I can. When these programs are largely available to local governments and public water systems, so those are our applicants, right? Like the local governments, public water systems, water and sewer districts are the applicants. They undertake these projects, and when they do, they size their facilities to best meet their needs over a projected period of time. So so a community X is going to build a new sewer or a new wastewater plant or a new water plant. They go through that evaluation to determine like how big should those facilities be. And generally speaking, whatever that size is generally speaking is fine with the agency and is eligible. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, if we would encourage a community to do a very thorough evaluation of like how much capacity do you need, and if that includes capacity for institutional or industrial sources, then they should include that. And by and large, the entire project would be eligible. So if it's industrial capacity that's needed, that can probably be accommodated in the financial assistance that we make to the local government. I hope that's helpful. If not, let's talk offline. Be happy to chat.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question comes from Stephen Howie. And John, I was wondering if you could answer this one. When Ohio EPA issues the final amended drinking water implementation plan, will it include the agency's response to all comments in Appendix M?
Sure will, Steve. And I don't know offhand if it's Appendix M. I don't know, Katie, if you want to shake your head yet. Okay, we will. And this year was a little bit unique that we received some comments kind of ahead of the comment period. So we anticipate answering any comments that kind of came in up through the comment period when the public hearings occurred. So pretty robust comments from the outside world. So yes, we will be speaking to those comments in the PMP.
Thanks, John. For the next question, Katie, do you want to take this one? Brian Hackman is asking, funding being sought would be for the construction of project year 2023 award, correct?
Sorry, Jesse, can you repeat that?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Brian Hackman is asking, funding being sought would be for construction in project year 2023 award.
Yes, so as Jerry, I think in our earlier slides, he kind of went through our program years for each program are a little offset. So when we talk about program year 2023, it means a little bit different of a time frame depending on the program. So for WPCLF for wastewater, that's calendar year. So program year 23 for wastewater is on the calendar year, and the program year 23 for drinking water is on the state fiscal year cycle. So that ends July 1 through June 30. So yes is the answer on both counts. Any nominations coming in are for program year 2023, and then that the time frame for those projects to be awarded is just a little offset for wastewater versus drinking water.
Thanks, Katie. I think the next question is for you as well. It comes from Caitlin Casper. She asks, can principal forgiveness go toward lead service line mapping inventory? what about principal forgiveness toward removing known lead service lines on the private side? And we might have addressed this a little bit before, but if you can just reiterate.
Yeah, good question, Caitlin. So for lead service line funding, it's all of the above. We want to, we're looking at planning, design, and construction. And construction includes removal of lead service lines on both public and private property. That's, private property is, kind of a new thing. We don't do a lot of work on private property in the SRF programs on either side. So having the authority through the programs to take out that private side lead service line is an important step, and we're excited to be able to take care of both of those with the funding. So it's for private and public side lead service line removals.
Thanks, Katie. The next question is from Zayed Musalam. And he's asking, I assume funding approval for any drinking water project through this federal infrastructure bill is subject to compliance with Ohio EPA Asset Management Program. John, do you want to take that?
I think that's a good assumption. Drinking water program, we do have rules that speak to the asset management program for state of Ohio through our division of drinking and groundwater. So good assumptions, Aya, that they will apply. If you have some concerns about your public water system or one of the applicants, being able to meet those requirements, we'd be happy to talk to you, just where's the fit for our funding program and working with our partners in division of drinking and groundwaters.
Thanks, John. Katie, we have a question from Elizabeth Barlick. She's asking, is a formal agreement or permission from the property owner or local legislation required in order to remove private side lead service lines?
It's a great question, Elizabeth. And yes, you'll have to have some, unless your community has, an overarching like ordinance or resolution saying, we have the authority to come onto private property as part of like a public health issue to remove lead service lines. There'll need to be an agreement, with the homeowner or the property owner for the private side lead service line. So typically, this is actually something that is kind of all over the board that we've seen so far on how folks go about this. But either like an access agreement that is between the contractor and the property owner, that's a very common one, or the community goes, kind of door to door and gets that access for the purposes of the project. But that third option is, if there is a local resolution or local legislation ordinance that provides that access, that's fine to rely on as well. There aren't too many of those kind of in place, but it is an option on the table.
Thanks, Katie. Just letting everybody know, we're coming down to our last couple questions. It looks like we have 3 that we're still going to read through. If you have any last minute questions you would like to submit, go ahead. And like I said, we will try to get those answered, but we're coming down to our last couple. And Mary did pull up on the PowerPoint, John, Katie, and Jerry's contact information. So if you think of other questions, feel free to reach out to them or that infrastructure funding at epa.ohio.gov. But we'll go ahead and read the last couple questions. This one is from Tony Vogel, and Tony is asking, I have a project for a new lift station, which is broken into 3 contracts, the headworks upgrade, the force main installation, and the new lift station. Can they be submitted as one project? John, do you want to take that one?
Yep, that's perfectly fine and probably preferred for us. You nominate just call it a lift station project, and when it comes time to bidding, you would just kind of bid those out as 3 separate contracts. There could be some benefit in that, just in the challenging bidding environment we've been seeing. Sometimes we've seen applicants have success that way where they break it down, but that's perfectly fine, and we would like to see one nomination.
Thanks, John. Katie, Heidi Sano, she may have left, but I'm going to read her question so the audience can hear. She's asking, does a local health department have to be the one to apply for the WPCLF, or can a local partner apply? We are hoping that our community housing improvement program would be able to apply.
That's a really good question. Our typical process, and my presumption is we're in relation to like household sewage treatment systems, and our principal forgiveness for that typically goes through the local health department, because they are the authority at the local level for oversight of those systems. That's typically who we work with, but we'd be happy to have a conversation if that's a different setup for a particular county, and who that organization goes to. So I know you said Heidi's probably left, but we'd be happy to have a conversation with her about that.
Thanks, Katie. And our last question is from Scott Ankrum. And John, do you want to take this one? Scott's asking, where can we find the list of public water systems that meet the disadvantaged eligibility cities? I found the list for the WPCLF, but can't find the WSRLA, or are they the same?
Yeah, good question, Scott. We don't actually have a list right now for the WSRLA. I mentioned earlier, it's pretty straightforward for us to develop the WPCLF, disadvantaged community list, because all of those factors are readily available. We look at unemployment, poverty rate, median household income, things of that nature, so we can make that determination right away. With drinking water program, we've got one factor that does take a little doing, and that's your sewer and water rates. So there's one additional factor we're looking at, as well as the project has to address a human health component. So we'll give that some thought for next program year if there's a way to kind of make that a little more clear for people. But by and large, there is such parity between the two programs. If you're on that list for clean water, the WPCLF disadvantaged community, you're probably going to meet the criteria for the drinking water program, but we would like to clarify that or verify that for you if that's a question for one of your communities.
Thanks, John. Seeing no new questions, we're going to go ahead and conclude the information session for today. I want to thank Mary for her technical assistance as well as with the questions. I really want to give a big thanks to John, Katie, and Jerry for the presentation, and then really answering all those questions. Again, their contact information is on the screen currently if you want to contact them directly with any maybe follow-up questions. Also, any further questions that may pop into your head, we do have that email address, infrastructurefunding@epa.ohio.gov. You can contact that anytime with any questions as you are looking into this process. And finally, again, I encourage you, I think Jerry mentioned this as part of the presentation, but please keep a lookout at Ohio EPA's website and any social media, as well as DEPA's newsletter for any project announcements or things like that. That's best where to find that information. I think that's all that I have. I wanted to see Jerry, John, Katie, do you guys have any final comments?
I just want to thank everybody. I know we spent a lot of time, and I hope we've given you some good information. We've got, all this stuff is available online. We're open. We really want to encourage you to nominate your projects, all kinds, WPCLF, drinking water, emerging contaminants, drinking water, lead service lines. So please take advantage of the opportunity. Let us know if you have any questions. We're here to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. And again, thank you for tuning into Ohio EPA's meeting today. We hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.